Joe Walsh's life story is one of epic ups and downs. Walsh has endured tragedy and perseverance throughout his life, from an early interest in music inspired by his mother's classical training to the devastating deaths of his father and daughter. Few could see the immense burden he bore while he fought addiction and ascended to legendary status with the Eagles. Walsh is finally opening out about the realities and hardships of his rock star existence at the age of 76. Proving what his friends and admirers have long suspected regarding his personal conflicts. Be sure to tune in to find out. Both sorrow and talent cast a shadow over Joe Walsh as he began his musical career. Joe Fiddler Walsh, who was born on November 20, 1947, in Wichita, Kansas, considered music more than just a hobby. He was born with it. His mother instilled in him a lifelong appreciation for music through her practice as a classical pianist. However, Joe and his mother would endure the burden of his untimely death in an airplane crash as they relocated from one unstable home to another until they finally settled in Montclair, New Jersey. Joe, as a young man, took his first real musical steps in Montclair. Rock music and the intensity of groups like The Ventures and the Beatles influenced him to pick up a guitar when he was just 10 years old. He toyed with the oboe in school band, but his heart belonged to the electric guitar. This served as an outlet for his feelings and imagination. Growing up, Joe's life trajectory took him to Kent State University, where he began to fantasize about a future as a musician. He had already begun performing with Ohio bands at this point, gaining experience and self-assurance in the process. While a student at Kent State, he was a member of the band The Measles and quickly rose to the position of lead singer of the hard rock group The James Gang. In Northeast Ohio, they got famous very fast. Performing as a support act for legendary bands such as Led Zeppelin, Fleetwood Mac, and The Who. But the road wasn't without its share of shadows. When National Guard troops opened fire on a peaceful student demonstration at Kent State on May 4, 1970, Walsh was there. 4 people were killed and many more were wounded. The experience changed Joe's perspective on life and left an everlasting impression on his heart. As a son of the Gold Star, Joe was no stranger to tragedy. His father, a flight instructor, had died in the line of duty when Joe was a baby. The tragic events at Kent State only served to heighten his contemplation of existence and tranquility. Years after the fact, on the occasion of the half-century anniversary of that tragic day, Joe Walsh reflected on his experiences and related the horror of seeing his fellow students killed by gunshot. He was reminded of the delicate equilibrium between violence and optimism by the remembrance. He would never fully recover from that day, and its effects would continue to shape his music and his life's direction. Walsh, burdened by experience and a broader outlook, eventually parted ways with the James Gang, embarking on a fresh chapter by teaming up with Joe Vitale and Kenny Passarelli to establish the band Barnstorm. After his stint with the James Gang ended in 1972, Joe Walsh was at a turning point in his artistic career. Rather than conform to the norm or join an existing group, he chose to forge his own unique route. Walsh established Barnstorm with the help of his college pal Joe Vitale on drums and Kenny Passarelli on bass. A project was the wrong word to describe this. The album was an adventurous sonic journey that fused rock, folk, jazz, and even some Caribbean flavor. They took a radical turn that year with their self-titled first album, which showcased Walsh's skill as an adventurous composer in addition to his guitar playing. The record didn't top the charts, but it did find listeners who loved Walsh's risky innovation. His creative guitar skills and insightful lyrics were on full display in songs like Mother Says and Turn to Stone. Barnstorm wasn't only a band to music lovers. Walsh was able to explore new musical territory and showcase his developing artistry in this setting. Other musicians, like the Eagles, who would later become Walsh's bandmates, started taking notice of his talent around this time. The Smoker You Drink, The Player You Get, Barnstorm's second album, featuring the single Rocky Mountain Way, was released in 1973. The song was a watershed event in Walsh's career, cementing her status as a formidable solo singer with its iconic slide guitar and laid-back groove. Barnstorm may have broken up in 1974, but it had an indelible impact on Walsh's career. He was able to grow as a musician during his brief time with Barnstorm because of the creative freedom he enjoyed there. This period was formative for his artistic development, setting the stage for his later success with the Eagles and establishing his legacy in rock music. When Joe Walsh joined the Eagles, a groundbreaking rock band of the 1970s, a mere year after the Barnstorm had broken up, he was at the pinnacle of his career. He had impeccable timing. In step with the band's transition to a more guitar-driven sound and the exit of original member Bernie Leadon. Walsh complemented the Eagles' developing sound with his charismatic performance, unparalleled guitar talent, and nuanced musicality. This collaboration propelled Walsh to international stardom and propelled the band to new heights. After joining the Eagles, Walsh quickly became an integral part of their seminal 1976 album, Hotel California. His guitar skills is legendary in rock lore, particularly in the famous title track battle with Don Felder. Hotel California's eerie riff is still one of the most famous solos ever, captivating listeners with its enigmatic charm. Life in the Fast Lane, another one of Walsh's brilliant contributions to the Eagles, was based on a catchy guitar riff. Blossomed into an enormous smash that highlighted Walsh's abilities as a guitarist and lyricist. It was representative of the band's new, more aggressive sound, which moved away from their folk rock origins and towards a more powerful rock presence. Walsh's dominant guitar work was a major factor in the band's style redefinition, which in turn helped them gain popularity and cement their place in stadium rock history. His friendship with Glenn Frey and Don Henley deepened, and the Eagles were energized by his daring energy and inventive flair. The Eagles were already successful when Walsh joined the band, but his entry marked the beginning of their most financially successful and critically acclaimed period. When Joe Walsh became a member of the Eagles, the globe was being rocked by the band's now iconic Hotel California. However, a tragic period of his life was hidden from view, and it lay behind all of his achievements. They were wed in 1972 after Walsh wed Stephanie Rhodes a few years before in 1971. Tragic events in 1974 broke their seemingly perfect family. Little Emma suffered serious brain injuries in a terrible vehicle accident caused by a careless motorist. She died that night despite everyone's best attempts, and her parents' grief was overwhelming. Joe tragically had to rush home to confront the unfathomable loss. The catastrophe had occurred while he was on tour. Walsh and Stephanie's story took a turn for the worst after the tragedy. Their relationship started to crumble as they were overcome with sadness, and they eventually divorced. Joe fought to find light within the darkness brought on by the insurmountable agony of losing Emma. He released Song for Emma in 1974 as a truly moving homage to his daughter, Emma, and he channeled his anguish into the song. Walsh spoke frankly about how Emma's death had affected him in an interview with Rolling Stone in 2016. He admitted that his harmful actions sprang from a so-what mentality that was motivated by his extreme wrath against God and the world. He sought comfort in drugs and booze, which he used to dull the agony and block out the truth he couldn't stand to confront. In spite of everything, Joe managed to pay tribute to his daughter's memories. As a little memorial fountain in North Boulder Park, he erected it in honor of Emma, hoping to find solace there in commune with her soul. The rock and roll lifestyle was Joe Walsh's life. It came with the territory to stay up late, party hard, and engage in self-destructive conduct. Even though he teetered precariously between stardom and self-destruction, his erratic behavior did not prevent him from attaining tremendous success. Still, Walsh came to the conclusion that something needed to shift after a while. His lifestyle was unsustainable and he was approaching a breaking point, despite how exhilarating it all appeared. There has been a gradual shift in the music industry toward being more accommodating to its employees. Things were drastically different during Walsh's prime, though. Because of the constant demands of touring, hedonism was almost expected, and drugs and drink were easily accessible. Substance abuse became an accepted part of being a musician, and many talented people fell prey to its destructive cycle. As a result, a lot of talented people left the field. Tragically, some people succumbed to addiction all too quickly and had to leave this world. Nothing Joe Walsh accomplished was common in that realm, though. Resolving to face his addiction directly was his choice. The road to recovery was long and winding. Big change doesn't happen all at once. Walsh discussed his recent struggles with alcoholism and white substance abuse in a frank interview with Billboard published in 2018. A support system that caused him to withdraw and act out of character. A cloud descended over his work as his anger and bitterness consumed him, driving people away. Walsh, who is no stranger to stage anxiety, sought solace in booze, as do many artists. It was unnerving to think of performing on stage without it. However, he ultimately made the decision that changed his life in 1993 to stop drinking. Sobriety was something he was afraid would sap his performing energy and creativity, but he dove in nonetheless. One Day at a Time, a song that Walsh released in 2012, exposed his struggles with addiction and gave listeners an honest account of his path. Walsh reflected on his battles in an interview with Rolling Stone published in 2016 and revealed that he had kept up a mask to conceal the impact of his addiction for a long time. But it got to be too much, and he started down some dark roads that nearly killed him. He may have been saved by hitting rock bottom, furnishing him with the shock he needed to reverse the situation before to its demise. A tragic destiny from which many of his contemporaries also failed to escape. Joe Walsh provided more than only guitar prowess to the Eagles when he joined in 1975. He was famed for both his music and his outrageous antics in hotel rooms, which made some question whether he would be a good fit for the Eagles' laid-back approach. There were some reservations among the band members behind closed doors. It was a concern of theirs that Walsh's wild partying methods might undermine their reputation. In the end, his erratic behavior was the reason the band was kicked out of multiple venues. However, Walsh's musical genius could not be denied. He gave the Eagles a fresh sound with his energetic guitar riffs and songwriting. Walsh said his actions weren't only a phase when he was a rock star to the Daily Mail years later. They concealed a profound lack of self-confidence. Walsh frequently felt the need to prove himself when performing beside legendary musicians like Don Henley and Glenn Frey, who were renowned for their exceptional singing and songwriting abilities. He became addicted to substances and engaged in risky behavior due to his insecurities. Things went downhill for Walsh after the Eagles broke up in 1980. His substance misuse skyrocketed when he was dating Stevie Nicks, when he no longer had the support system of the band. Substance abuse and excessive partying ensnared them in a terrible circle. Their addictions drove their romance, as even Nicks eventually acknowledged. In 1994, during the Eagles' reunion, Walsh finally faced his issues. His bandmates were worried about his health and encouraged him to seek therapy, particularly Timothy B. Schmidt. Performing music together again wasn't the only reason for this reunion. It inspired Walsh to take back control of his life. "I am sober now," he said. An ordeal that, in hindsight, he would describe as the great struggle of his life. His friends' encouragement and the 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous helped him re-establish his life, day by day, after alcohol had convinced him he couldn't manage without it. His sober experience has become his defining tale today, according to Walsh. It is his personal growth that had the most impact, even if he achieved great recognition and fortune with the Eagles. As evidence of his dedication to sobriety and proof that even famous people may achieve salvation, he is involved with the First Step to Recovery Treatment Center. Fleetwood Mac's ethereal vocalist and soulmate Stevie Nicks once sang a song about love and loss that many of us can relate to. Joe Walsh, the renowned Eagles guitarist who Nicks has frequently referred to as her great love, is at the heart of this story. They were the stuff of rock and roll romantic comedies in the 80s. Two legendary musicians, Nick claimed she loved Walsh more than anybody else, and they were brought together by an intense bond that spanned their entire careers. Even more so than her music and her career combined. Upon first meeting at a hotel bar, Nick's feelings for Walsh were immediate and intense. Everything they did was driven by an overwhelming affection for one another. However, their connection was impacted by darker influences, as is common in many stories told during the whirlwind of celebrity. Their time together was overshadowed by substance misuse. Despite their undeniable affection for one another, their relationship was weakened by their shared disastrous lifestyle. Nicks has been forthright about their struggles with addiction and how they caused them to lose focus on everything else. Walsh eventually made the tough choice to go away. A devastating loss broke Nicks to her very core. She persevered through the long, arduous process of healing, taking the wisdom gained from that difficult chapter with her. "Has anyone ever written anything for you?" A haunting tribute to the love they shared. Even after the dust settled, Walsh reflected on their time together with a blend of tenderness and lucidity, as she poured her pain and devotion into her songs. Even though he saw their relationship as more sibling-like, he still referred to Nicks as a soulmate and a lover. A bond formed through the anarchy and anguish of their mutual challenges. Their love for one another was profound, but the burden of addiction was too great, and they finally drifted apart. In rock's long history, supergroups have risen and fallen, frequently with great fanfare before quickly vanishing from memory. Some, like Milk, became legendary, while others, ripped apart by competing ambitions and inflated egos, disintegrated almost as rapidly. The best, Joe Walsh's supergroup from the early 1990s, was unique, though. They never achieved superstar status or collapsed in a spectacular fashion. Instead, they disappeared just as fast as they had come, leaving behind an ephemeral and intriguing trail of evidence. Walsh, who had already established himself as a musical legend thanks to his tenure with the Eagles, assembled a stellar ensemble in the early 1990s. This lineup wasn't like any other. Among his associates were Rick Livingston, John Entwistle, Keith Emerson, Simon Phillips, and Jeff "Skunk" Baxter. They boasted about being the best, and with such an audacious name, everyone had high expectations. Performing hits from the careers of all members, they went on a brief tour of Japan in September 1990. Life in the Fast Lane by the Eagles, Reelin' in the Years by Steely Dan, and Fanfare for the Common Man by Emerson, Lake, and Palmer were just a few of the popular songs that were played during the performance. Critics were eager to point out the tour's flaws and praise its strengths. In Rolling Stone, it was mentioned that the sole lesser-known member, Rick Livingston, had a hard time keeping up with the legendary voices of Don Henley, Roger Daltrey, Donald Fagen, and Greg Lake. But the finest had left an impression, albeit fleeting, regardless of the criticism. Even though technology has changed the music industry, Joe Walsh chose to go in a different direction. Walsh decided to go against the grain for his 11th solo album, Analog Man. He wanted to get back to the unprocessed, natural sound of the past by using analog recording methods instead of the digitally polished sound that is popular now. This was more than just an album for Walsh, it was a message. Legend has it that Walsh lived the rock and roll life. He experienced the pinnacle of rock star life in the 70s and 80s, as well as an accelerated way of living that mirrored the decadence of that time. He became an icon of rock and roll's defiant youth, yet beneath his wild exterior was a phenomenally gifted musician. He joined the likes of Jimi Hendrix and Eric Clapton as a guitar legend because to his work with groups like the James Gang and the Eagles, who created some of rock's most iconic riffs and melodies. Despite his achievements, Walsh's personal life was precariously balanced, while his health and career were being consumed by substance misuse. Walsh reached a turning point in his life in the late 1980s. The once glamorous lifestyle of rock and roll extravagance has become a living hell. Falling to my knees was a harsh reality check. In order to not just live, but thrive, Walsh knew he had to make a complete and utter transformation. His path to sobriety was marked by unwavering resolve. The journey was lengthy and challenging. However, it resulted in a new beginning for me. Walsh finally found the clarity and calm he had been seeking in his sober journey. Not only did this life-altering experience affect him, but it also transformed his music. A more profound and thoughtful approach to songwriting emerged alongside newfound sobriety. He found solace in music as a means of processing his feelings and sharing his tale with unfiltered candor. This adventure gave birth to Analog Man. It was more than simply going back to analog, it was getting back to the real thing. Recorded with an all-star cast that included Jeff Lynne and Ringo Starr, the album showcased Walsh's revitalized enthusiasm for music. The album was largely produced by Lynne in her pristine style, but Walsh ensured that it kept its raw, organic quality. In his pursuit of a more organic, lived-in sound, he vocally condemned the excessive use of technology in contemporary music. Analog Man deals with very intimate topics. As Walsh faced his history and embraced his present, the lyrics provide a window into his thoughts on gratitude, self-improvement, and contemplation. While Walsh's wit and wisdom are on full display in the title track, a reflection on navigating a digital world, his fragility is revealed in the album's quieter moments. With the new door that sobriety had opened in his life, he was able to write songs that touched people deeply because of the honesty and self-awareness they contained. Walsh was very forthright in interviews about how his sobriety had rekindled his passion for music and saved his life. Although he had dabbled in trying to be trendy for a while, he finally understood that being authentic was more important. Walsh paid tribute to that insight with Analog Man, an album that drew from the past while remaining firmly rooted in the teachings of the present.